go.
Hi, it's Vicky and Chris again from Plant Planners. We thought we would do a short video today, one of the first of many I expect, about weeding. Weeding is everybody's dread really when it comes to the garden, but it is a bit of a necessary evil. Some of this information will be very basic and far too basic for most of you, but it is worth just having a think about the different sorts of weeds. And as the weather warms up at the moment and we start to go into spring, it really is a very important time to get on top of certain weeds. So very basically, and this is very basic, is there's two sorts of weeds. There's perennial weeds who have a permanent root system and shoot from that year after year. And that's things like dandelions, bindweed, the dreaded bindweed, ground elder. And then you have annual weeds which set seed a little bit early at the moment, so later in the season, and they're the ones that create that sort of blanket weeding, and they have very fine roots. They set seed and then they die usually, and it's quite important to sort of know the difference in terms of what you use to get rid of them. So one of the most important things is perennial weeds. You need to be getting the roots out, otherwise you have the thankless task of pulling them or cutting them, and then they just come straight back. Annual weeds, you can just slice the tops off and they won't regrow. So I actually, because we mulch most of our gardens, we have very little problem with annual weeds, and so I don't actually use a hoe, hardly ever, because we try and prevent those annual weeds from coming at all. So when you're looking at perennial weeds, we are into the first couple of enemies of the season. The first one is one called celandine, which is actually quite a pretty wildflower. It has this lovely yellow buttercup colour. And some people, if it's in an area of the garden where you're not worried about it being there, then don't worry about it. If it's in the middle of your border, I would urge you to get it out, because it quite quickly creates this blanket leaves and just makes the border look a little bit wild rather than structured. When you get these out, you do need to dig right out and get they have like a little almost potato-y tuber on the bottom, and it's very important that you get that out. If you snap them up here, they will regrow. You can weed kill these, but a couple of hours of just getting them out right down to there really does sort the problem out. If you haven't got time to do that, at the very least stop them flowering, and so that they don't self-seed anymore, because they do love to self-seed all around the garden. The other major one is a woodland weed called an arum maculatum, and that is a type of lily, arum lily, and it produces, you've probably seen them, these very big bright red beaded they're not really flower heads, they do look like beads, which are quite poisonous if you ingest them. So it is quite important to get rid of these from the garden, and they will hide in the kind of woodlandy areas under leaves. Again, the most common problem is you snap them because they're quite deep rooted, especially if they're established, and you really need to get out this bottom tuber with the roots on it. So the other one that's around at the moment is the favourite dandelion, lovely long tap roots. You need to get those out, and this is just an example of an arum lily when it's very new, so that you can identify that you need to get, that's the easiest time to get them out, when they're this small. So in terms of tools, if they're very deep rooted, the best thing you can use is a fork, and you do need to get right underneath, and this just shows you these lilies. You just need to wiggle and tease them out. I prepared that earlier so that it looks nice and easy, and go around, get them out now before they flower, and that's a really good job done. A lot of people ask me, do I use a garden fork, a hand fork, what do I use for weeding? And one of the best things I have ever bought, and I've never gone away from it, is a builder's pointing trowel that they use for bricklaying. It really is the best weeding tool you can have. You can go quite deep for a dandelion, and you can, if you have a few annual weeds, you can just hoe the surface and literally scrape the surface off. It really is the only tool I use in the garden. If you've got perennial weeds and you go with the fork and you think, I'm not going to get that root out, or I'm not going to get the bulb at the bottom out, leave it, replant it and spray it, because the best thing you can do is to get the whole root out or kill it to the root. So any of the strong weed killer guns, spray the leaves and then walk away. And then the biggest mistake, do not, when the leaves go brown, try and get that out or break it off, or try and dig it out at that point. Just leave it to die off and completely decompose into the soil so that it goes right down to that root and kills it. So in the coming weeks we will try and keep you up to date with what's coming through, but at the moment your main ones are the celandine, dandelions and these arum lilies in the woodland, and then in a couple of weeks time it will be time to keep a look out for bindweed. So I hope that helps. Any questions, please ask.